This is a story about a village that never had electricity. It's not a story with a twist or a hero or a villain who gets what they deserve. It's quieter than that. It's the kind of story your grandmother might have told you, slowly in the dark, with the ceiling fan spinning overhead, not because it was exciting, but because the sound of a calm voice moving through ordinary things is one of the oldest ways human beings have ever learned to fall asleep. So let yourself settle now, wherever you are, your bed, your couch, your headphones in at 2 a.m. because your brain won't stop. Just let your body get a little heavier. Let your jaw unclench. Your shoulders can drop. You don't have to do anything for the next hour except listen. The village is waiting. The village didn't have a name that anyone wrote down. The people there called it by a word that roughly translated to the place near the old banyan, which tells you something about how they thought about geography. Not coordinates, not zip codes, just landmarks, just things that had been there long enough to mean something. The banyan tree was enormous, the kind of tree that looks like it forgot what it was supposed to be and just kept growing in every direction. Its aerial roots had come down and touched the ground and become new trunks, so it was hard to tell where the original tree ended and everything else began. Children climbed it. Old men sat under it in the afternoon. The village cow, a patient, slow-breathing creature named for nothing in particular, just called the cow, the way you might call something the spoon. Sometimes stood under it when it rained, head low, eyes half closed, in that particular state of bovine peace that has no human equivalent. The village had maybe 40 families. It had a pond. It had a mosque with a cracked outer wall that had been cracked since before anyone could remember. It had a market that happened on Thursdays, where people sold vegetables and argued about prices, and sometimes forgot to argue and just talked. And it had, near the edge of the village, closest to the river, one particular house. The house belonged to a family of 5. There was the mother, and she is where the story begins, because every house like this begins with the woman who holds it together. She was not young anymore. She had the kind of face that had once been very pretty and had traded that prettiness slowly and without bitterness for something more durable, something that knew things. She woke up before everyone else and fell asleep after everyone else. And in between, she cooked and cleaned and worried, and occasionally sat very still in the doorway in the late afternoon, watching nothing, which is something tired people do when they are trying to remember who they are outside of being tired. There was the father, a man of medium height and large opinions, who worked in the fields during the planting and harvesting seasons and spent the in-between months doing small repairs around the village, fixing fences and patching roofs, the kind of man who is always more comfortable doing something with his hands than sitting still. He was not cruel. He was not especially warm either. He was present, which in those days counted for quite a lot. There was the son, the eldest child, 18 years old, at that particular age where a boy has become physically a man, but his emotions are still catching up. Still jerky and uneven like a cart, with one wheel slightly smaller than the other. He was proud in the way that boys with little power often become proud, directing that pride towards small things. The way he plowed a furrow straighter than his father, the way he could fix a rope knot faster than anyone he knew. There was the daughter, Lamia. And there was Kausar, the boy who worked for the family, not a servant exactly, in the formal sense, more like a fixture, He had arrived when he was 12, sent by a distant relative who could no longer feed him, and he had stayed. He slept in a corner of the main room on a thin mat and ate what the family ate and worked from before sunrise to after sunset, and in the 8 years he had been there, he had never once been thanked directly, though the father did sometimes nod at him in a way that Koza had learned to read as approval. 5 people, 1 house, no electricity, ever. Lamia. Let me tell you about Lamia, because the story can't really go anywhere without her. She was 16. She was dark-skinned, the kind of dark that, in that village, in that time, was treated as a misfortune. Her mother had worried about it since she was born, not because the mother herself believed it was a problem, but because she knew the world the girl would have to move through, and she knew the world was going to be unkind about it. And there is a particular grief a mother carries when she loves something that the world has already decided to be careless with. The village had opinions about Lamia's skin the way villagers have opinions about everything, loudly, casually, without thinking too hard about the weight of it. The older women would click their tongues. Her brother sometimes called her names that he thought were jokes. Even the father, without intending cruelty, would sometimes introduce her to visitors with a slight hesitation, a half-second of awkwardness that Lamia had learned to feel before it happened, the way you feel a cold front moving in before the temperature actually drops. Lamia had learned by 16 to make herself smaller in public and larger in private. In public, she moved quietly, kept her eyes down, answered questions briefly. In private, in the evening, in the half-dark before sleep, she was different. She told stories, long, rambling stories that went nowhere in particular, that mixed things she'd heard from traders passing through with things she'd made up, and things she'd dreamed, and things she'd seen in the patterns of water and clouds, and the faces of animals. Her mother listened. Koza listened. Sometimes even the cow, if it was close enough to the door, seemed to pause and flick an ear in her direction. The father and the brother usually fell asleep before she finished, which was, in a way, the whole point. Part 3. How the night began in that village. With no electricity, the day ended when the light ended. This sounds simple, but it was not a small thing. The sun would go down, not all at once, but in stages, the way good things leave. First, the direct light would soften, going from white to gold to something almost pink. The shadows would get longer and gentler. The heat of the day, which in summer was punishing and in winter merely uncomfortable, would ease. The birds would do that thing they do at dusk, a kind of frantic calling back and forth, as if checking attendance before they settled, and then go quiet. Then came the dusk itself, that strange in-between time, not day and not night, when everything looks slightly more beautiful and slightly more uncertain than it did an hour before. The pond at the edge of the village would turn the color of the sky, orange, then gray, then the particular deep blue that only exists for about 20 minutes before the stars come out, and then the dark. Not the dark you know if you live in a city, not the dark with the orange glow above it from a million street lamps, not the dark that isn't really dark at all, real dark. The kind of dark where you hold your hand in front of your face and have a conversation with yourself about whether you can actually see it or whether you're only imagining you can see it because you know it's there. In this dark, a lamp was everything. The family had a small oil lamp. The bowl was clay, slightly uneven, handmade, obviously by someone who had not been an expert, but had been adequate, which is true of most useful things. The wick was a twist of cloth. When it burned, it gave off a soft, warm, slightly unsteady light that reached maybe 4 or 5 feet in any direction, before giving up. It also smoked a little, not badly, but enough that after an hour or two in a room with the lamp lit and the windows closed, there was a particular quality to the air, thicker, warmer, faintly oily, that you noticed when you stepped outside and breathed the night air and felt the difference. The lamp was lit at dusk. The family would gather for the evening meal, rice, lentils, whatever vegetables were in season, sometimes a small amount of fish if the river had been generous. They ate together on a mat on the floor, not at a table, not with assigned seats, just the 5 of them, cross-legged or however they found themselves. The lamp in the center, the food passed around in clay bowls. This was, in some ways, the best part of the day, not because of the food, though the food was good in the way that simple food made by someone who knows what they're doing is always good, but because the darkness outside had a way of making the inside feel smaller and warmer and more complete. There was nothing to look at but each other. No screen to check, no distraction to reach for. Just the 5 faces in the lamplight and the sound of eating, and occasionally something worth saying. The father would talk about the fields, what needed to be done, what had been done, the small bureaucracy of agricultural life. The mother would listen and ask questions that were really just ways of making him feel heard. The son would offer opinions that were slightly too confident, which the father would deflect without exactly disagreeing. Korsar would eat quietly and watch everything, and say almost nothing, which was the role he had learned to play and which had, over years, become genuinely comfortable for him. He was a watcher. He had a watcher's patience. And Lamia would eat and sometimes say things, and sometimes not, reading the room with the particular sensitivity of someone who has learned that rooms have moods, that meals have temperatures, that it is not always the moment for what you have to say. Part 4. The 3 ways they slept. There was not one way this family slept. There were 3, depending on the season and the weather, and whatever complicated negotiation had happened in the preceding hours between comfort and practicality. Let me tell you about each one. The first way, under the open sky. When the summer nights were at their worst, which is to say, when the heat didn't break after sundown, but just shifted from aggressive to merely oppressive, the family would carry their mats outside. Not far, just to the front of the house, which opened onto a small yard of packed earth with a neem tree at one corner and the family's kitchen garden at another. They would spread reed mats on the ground, each person carrying their own, slightly worn, slightly familiar in the particular way that mats become familiar when you sleep on them every night for years. They would lie down, above them the sky. In a village with no electricity, the sky at night is something that modern people have almost no reference for. You would have to go very far from any city, out into a real desert, or up into real mountains to see it. The Milky Way is visible, not as a faint suggestion, but as a structure, a thing with depth and texture, a river of light that you can follow across the entire sky from one horizon to the other. Individual stars have color, some white, some faintly gold, some blue. The moon, when it's full, casts shadows, real shadows, from tree branches and roof edges and people lying on mats with their arms at their sides. The family would lie in that sky and mostly not talk. There was a particular order to their positions, the parents nearest the door, the son beside them, Lamia on the far side, Korsar at a respectful distance, but not so far that he was outside the loosely defined circle of the family. The cow was tied to a stake at the edge of the yard and moved occasionally with a soft metallic sound of its bell, and breathed audibly in the quiet. The sounds of a village at night when there is no electricity are specific and strange and beautiful if you let them be. Crickets, but not the uniform chirping of a summer night in the suburbs. This was more complex, more layered, different species at different frequencies, creating something almost like music, if music didn't have a melody so much as a texture. Frogs near the pond, performing their ancient argument with the darkness, the occasional dog far enough away that it was just a sound and not a worry. Wind in the neem tree, which had a dry, papery sound, like someone slowly turning pages, and above all of it, silence. Not the absence of sound, a real thing, a presence, the silence that sits underneath all the other sounds and holds them up, the silence that villages have and cities have lost. Lying on their mats, looking up at that sky, in that silence, with those sounds, they fell asleep the way people fell asleep before someone invented the concept of insomnia, slowly. Without effort, the body would do it on its own if you let it. The breath would deepen, the thoughts would lose their shape. The boundary between being awake and being asleep would become porous, soft, easy to pass through in either direction. Lamia, lying on her back with her hands on her stomach, would watch the stars until she couldn't anymore. She had names for them, not the official names, not the names from books she had never read, but her own names, private names, the names you give to things when they become yours through attention. There was a cluster near the middle of the sky she called the handful, because it looked like someone had taken a handful of light and thrown it up there. There was a single very bright star near the horizon she called the stubborn one, because it was always the last to fade in the morning. She would look at them until her eyes closed on their own, and then she would sleep. The second way, windows open. Inside when the rains came, and in that part of the world, the rains came with conviction. Sleeping outside stopped being an option, but the rains also brought something with them. Temperature. The air cooled, the humidity changed. There was a different quality to the night, washed and quiet, with the smell of wet earth coming through the windows and the sound of water on the roof, on the leaves, dripping from the eaves in an irregular rhythm that was almost better than silence. On these nights, they slept inside with the windows open. The windows of this house were simple, wooden shutters, no glass. You swung them open and tied them back with a cloth loop, and the night came in without asking permission. Moths came too, batting softly against the lampshade, if the lamp was still lit. Sometimes, a small frog would find its way onto the windowsill and sit there in its inexplicable frog contentment, watching the room with its golden eyes. They would lay out their mats on the floor, the same order, more or less, though compressed by the walls. The lamp would burn low. The father would fall asleep first, as he almost always did, with the reliability of someone who has worked physically all day and has a body that takes sleep seriously. The son would fight it for a while, in the way that young men fight sleep, as if staying awake a little longer is a form of freedom. The mother would stay up longest, not from insomnia, but from habit, from the deep maternal surveillance that never quite turns off, the checking and rechecking of the quiet to make sure everything was as it should be. Korsar slept lightly. He always had. It was not anxiety exactly, more like an attentiveness that never fully switched off, even in sleep. He had the kind of sleep that could be interrupted by a sound that wasn't right and would become alert immediately, fully, without the grogginess that other people needed to shake off. This was useful. It had saved the family from a number of minor disasters: a lamp left burning too close to a cloth, a goat that had gotten loose one night and was trying to eat the kitchen garden. Small catastrophes that were not catastrophes at all, because Korsar had woken before they became one. The rain on the roof was good for sleeping. This is not just a feeling. There's something about consistent, non-threatening sound that the human brain finds deeply settling. It masks other sounds, which means the brain stops alerting to them. It's rhythmic without being repetitive. The rain hits different parts of the roof at different moments, creating variation within pattern, which is exactly what you need to stop paying attention to something. The body hears the rain and says, "This is fine. This has always been fine. Let go." And they would let go. The third way, lamp out. Lamir's voice. The third way was the way that happened when no one was quite ready to sleep, but everyone was too tired to stay properly awake. It happened most often on evenings after something difficult, a bad day in the fields, an argument. The family had arguments like all families, the kind that started about one thing and were really about another. A visit from a neighbor that had left tension in the air, an undefined heaviness that everyone felt but no one named. On these evenings, the lamp would be turned down to almost nothing, then blown out entirely. In the dark, Lamia would begin to talk. Not to tell stories exactly, though stories were part of it. More like she would begin to narrate. She had a quality to her voice in the dark, slower than her daytime voice, quieter, with a rhythm that she didn't consciously choose, but that came naturally, the way some people's voices naturally slow when the light goes. She would talk about ordinary things in a way that made them feel settled, permanent, like things that had always been and would always be. She would describe the fields in the morning, the particular way the light hit the dew on the rice plants before the sun got high, the sound of the water moving through the irrigation ditches, the smell of the mud at the edges where the water sat. She would describe the market on Thursdays, the way the old woman who sold gourds arranged them in a careful pyramid that collapsed at least once every Thursday, always to her theatrical dismay, as if this were somehow surprising every time. She would describe the river, the way it looked in different seasons, the way it sounded under the bridge when you stood on the bridge and just listened, the particular cold it had in early winter when you put your hand in it and the cold went all the way up your arm to somewhere behind your shoulder. She would describe the village at noon when everyone was inside and the streets were empty and the only movement was the heat. She would describe the sky. She would describe the cow. Her voice would get quieter as she went, naturally, finding its own level. And one by one, in the dark, the others would cross over. The father first, the son, the mother, whose breathing would change from the slightly held breath of someone still conscious to the open, loose breath of sleep. Korsar, who was always last, would stay with her voice a little longer than the others, listening not for the content, but for the sound, the thread of it, the way it wound through the dark room. He was, by this point, in love with her. He did not know what to do with this. He had no framework for it. She was the daughter of the family he worked for. She was 16 years old. She was considered unmarriageable by most of the village because of her skin. He was a boy from nowhere with nothing who slept on a mat in the corner. The idea of love between them was, he couldn't even finish the thought exactly. It just sat in him like a stone, heavy and permanent and not going anywhere. He would listen to her voice until his eyes closed, and then the room would be fully quiet and they would all be asleep in the dark, with no electricity, in the way that human beings slept for most of the time that human beings have existed. Part 5. The river. There is a particular kind of evening, not every season, but in that specific window when summer has broken and the monsoon has not yet arrived, when the air is cool in the early evening and warm enough later, when the stars come out sharp and clear over the river, when Corsair and Lamia would go to the water. This needs to be said carefully because it was not what it might sound like. The village would have catastrophized it, given the chance. But they were careful, and the village didn't know. It had started, practically. The river was Kausa's job, fetching water in the mornings, checking the levels during the rains, occasionally helping with the small repairs to the embankment that everyone in the village took turns maintaining. He knew the river the way you know something you have visited every day for years. He knew where the current was strong and where it went slack. He knew where the catfish rested in the deep parts and where the smaller fish schooled in the shallows. He knew which bank got the first light in the morning and which got the last light in the evening. He had mentioned this to Lamia once, the last light, specifically the way it came across the water just before dark, going gold and then orange and then that deep red that lasts about 3 minutes and then is gone. He had mentioned it the way you mention something beautiful to someone when you've noticed they also pay attention to beautiful things. She had asked if she could see it. The logistics were awkward. Going to the river in the evening, alone, as a 16-year-old girl, was not done. Going with a boy from a household was even more not done. But the mother, who was quietly perceptive in the way that tired women who have been watching everything for years often are, had said nothing when Lamia mentioned she was going to the river to help Corsair check the water level after supper, had said nothing the second time, had said nothing the third time either, and from that silence, Lamia understood that her mother had decided to trust something she could not quite name. They would walk to the river as the sky was darkening. The path was a short one, maybe 15 minutes, through the edge of the village and then along a raised earthen berm between fields and then down to the water. In the early part of the walk, they were still within sight of houses, and they walked with appropriate distance between them, Corsair carrying whatever tool or pot provided the excuse. Lamia walking alongside with her hands clasped in front of her, looking like someone performing the task of being ordinary. When they cleared the last house, something in both of them would relax. Not into anything inappropriate, into something more valuable than that, into ease, into the particular ease of two people who have understood each other without quite talking about it, who know that the other person is not a threat, who have spent enough time in the same small spaces to have calibrated to each other. They would find a spot on the bank, a flat section of packed earth where the grass had been worn away, probably by a goat or a cow that came here regularly, and sit, not too close, but not with formal distance either, the kind of distance where you're aware of the other person's presence the way you're aware of warmth. The river at dusk from that bank was everything Kausair had described. The light came across the water at a low angle, catching every ripple, turning the surface into something almost solid, something you could almost walk on. The water sounds, the movement of the current, the irregular sound of small waves against the bank, overlaid the cricket sounds from the fields in a way that was deeply, specifically peaceful. They didn't always talk. Sometimes they sat for a long time without saying anything, watching the light change, watching the first bats of the evening come out over the water and perform their frantic, irregular flight patterns. Not elegant like birds, but efficient, purposeful, following invisible paths through the air that only they could sense. The bats made no sound you could hear, but they moved through the dusk with such assurance that watching them was calming. When they did talk, they talked carefully, not because they were afraid of each other, but because they were aware, both of them, that they were talking across a great deal of things that couldn't be said directly. And they had learned to navigate around those things with a kind of conversational delicacy that they would not have been able to name, but that was, in fact, a form of grace. She would tell him her stories, not the bedtime narration versions she performed for the family, but the earlier drafts, the stranger ones, the ones where she wasn't sure what she was trying to say yet, the ones that started somewhere and ended somewhere entirely different, and she didn't know if that was a failure or just what stories do. He would listen with his whole attention, the way he listened to everything, and sometimes he would say something that turned out to be exactly what she needed to hear. Not a judgment, not advice, just a reflection. A "here is what I noticed about what you said," offered quietly and then left alone. She had never had this before. This specific thing, someone who listened to her like she was worth listening to. She had never quite known what to do with it. On these evenings, they would sometimes stay until it was almost full dark, and then, without discussing it, they would begin to make their way back. The walk back was different from the walk there, quieter, more internal, each carrying something that didn't need to be said. The village would be mostly dark when they arrived, the few lamps in windows making warm yellow rectangles in the black. The sound of someone's child still awake somewhere. A dog asleep in the road that didn't move as they passed. They would return to the house. Corsa would check the cow. It was always his last task of the evening, making sure it was settled, its rope secure, its water filled. He would stand in the dark yard for a moment after, looking up at the stars, the same stars Lamia was looking at from her mat inside. He would go in and lie down on his mat, and in the dark, sometimes he would hear her voice, beginning her slow narration of ordinary things, and he would close his eyes and let it happen. Part 6. What happens at 3 in the morning? There is a particular quality to 3 in the morning that has nothing to do with electricity. 3 in the morning is the deepest part of the night, the point furthest from both dusk and dawn, the center of darkness. Before electricity, this was not a time people typically saw, because they had gone to sleep much earlier and would wake much later, their sleep following the natural curve of the night without alarm clocks to interrupt it. But sometimes someone woke at 3, not from a nightmare necessarily, not from anxiety, sometimes just from the internal logic of the body, which has its own rhythms and occasionally surfaces for reasons you don't fully understand and don't need to. You simply wake into the deep quiet of 3 in the morning, the house completely dark, the sounds of the world outside muffled by the density of late night, and you lie there, aware that you are somewhere between sleep and waking, not quite in either. The mother woke at 3 most often. She would lie in the dark with her eyes open and listen to the sound of the house breathing. 5 people asleep, the cow asleep outside, the house itself settling in the cool of the deep night with small wooden sounds that she had stopped noticing years ago, except at 3 in the morning. She would listen to each person's breathing, a skill she had developed without deciding to, the way mothers develop skills, through repetition and worry. The father breathed heavily, not quite snoring, but with a solidity that reassured her. He was there. He was fine. The son breathed more lightly, occasionally shifting, still restless even in sleep, in the way that young men are restless even when they are still. Corsa breathed in a particular pattern, slightly longer exhales than inhales, almost deliberate, as if his sleep self was more controlled than his waking self ever let on. Lamia breathed quietly, almost too quietly. The mother had worried about this when she was small, had pressed her ear to the child's chest more than once to reassure herself. But Lamia was not fragile, just gentle. Even her sleep was gentle. The mother would lie there for half an hour, maybe less, taking this quiet census of the people in her care. And then, without deciding to, she would slide back under, and the house would be still again. The deep, genuine, accountable stillness of a house where 5 people are asleep with no electricity, in a village with no electricity, somewhere on the earth that most of the world has no precise idea of. Sleeping the way human beings slept for most of human history, in the dark, together, breathing together, moving through the night together like a small boat on water. Part 7. What the darkness did to them. Here is something true about living without electricity. The darkness was not an enemy. This seems obvious, but it needs to be said, because we live now in a time when we fight darkness. When we push it back with street lamps and phone screens and the blue glow of televisions on all night in the corners of living rooms, we have decided, collectively, that darkness is something to be defeated, that it is on the other side of some ancient war that we are winning. They had not decided this. They understood the darkness the way you understand weather, something that comes, something you have a relationship with, something that is neither good nor bad, but simply present, with its own properties that you learn over time. The darkness softened things. This is practical, not poetic. When you can't see clearly, everything softens. The roughness of surfaces, the sharpness of edges, the visible differences between people. In the dark, Lamia's skin was the same as her brother's skin, which was the same as her mother's skin. The darkness did not care. The darkness applied itself equally. The darkness also slowed things. There is a particular quality of attention that dark requires. You listen more carefully, you feel more carefully, you notice things through your skin and your ears that daylight lets you be lazy about. When the lamp went out, the family would become more aware of each other, not through sight, but through sound and presence. The awareness you have of a warm body near you, the specific texture of a particular person's silence, and the darkness gave them something that is very hard to come by, an end. The day ended completely. The lamp went out and the day was over, and there was nowhere to go and nothing to do, and the only option was to rest. They did not have the option of lying in bed, scrolling through news that would make them anxious, or videos that would keep their brains awake. The option was darkness, and the darkness was patient, and eventually the body would take what it was offered. Part 8. The sad thing about it. There is something sad about this story. It would be dishonest not to say it. A family lived without electricity, not as a lifestyle choice, not as a romantic experiment, not because they had read articles about the benefits of sleeping in natural darkness. They lived without it because they were poor, and because the village was remote, and because the infrastructure that would eventually bring power to villages like theirs moved slowly and with priorities that did not include them. In the winters, the dark came very early, and it was cold, and the lamp burned through their oil faster than they would have liked, and the father worried about the cost. There were evenings when the lamp was lit later than Lamia would have chosen, because the oil was low, because the budget was tight. There were mornings when the lack of light meant that Kausar was already out in the field before he could see properly, moving through the grey pre-dawn by feel and habit. The mother's eyes were getting worse. Reading was something she had done as a girl when she lived in a family that had a little more. A school book, a religious text, the occasional newspaper that made its way out from the town. By lamplight, this kind of reading was hard. The light was too dim and too warm to sustain it for long, and over years, her eyes had adjusted to close work by firelight in a way that was not good for them, in a way that slowly narrowed the focus they could hold. The village, when the power lines finally came, which happened years later, slowly, one pole at a time, did not feel only one thing about it. There was joy, genuine, uncomplicated joy. The first time the bulb in the family's house came on, a single bulb in the center of the main room, hanging from the ceiling on a cord, the mother covered her face with her hands and cried, not from sentiment, from relief. The brightness, after so many years of lamplight, was extraordinary, almost aggressive. You could see the corners of the room properly, the texture of the walls, the faces of the people you loved with a clarity that had not been available to you before. But the stars got harder to see, not impossible, not completely gone, but harder. The cow became visible all the time, its particular cow expressions available for scrutiny at any hour, which was fine for the cow, but removed something from the experience of standing in the yard at night, knowing the animal was there without quite seeing it, its breath visible as a warmth in the dark, its presence something you knew through every sense except sight. The evenings changed, the evenings that had been governed by the lamp, by the way the dark gathered everyone in, became longer and then difficult to end, because there was always another thing visible, always another task. The light made possible, the natural end that darkness had provided, was gone. Lamia noticed this most, though she could not have said exactly why. The stories she told in the dark got harder to tell when the light was on. Not impossible, but different, not quite the same thing. The dark had been part of it. The dark had been where the stories belonged, and the evenings by the river, fewer, and then fewer still. Not forbidden, not explicitly, just different. The old ease of them dissolved in the new electricity of the village, in the new visibility of everything, in the way that things become harder to protect when they become easier to see. Part 9. Coming to rest. Let me slow down now. Let me let the stories settle around you, the way that stories settle when you've been inside them for a while. The village is dark. Not the darkness of loss, not the darkness of fear, the darkness that comes every night as it has always come, the same darkness that was there before the first human being ever thought to fight it, the darkness that has watched every generation of people learn to close their eyes and trust it. Lamia is on her mat. She has finished talking, whatever it was tonight, the description of the river at the particular hour just before rain, the story about the goat from the next compound that got loose last week and ate someone's wash and stood in the yard looking profoundly unbothered about it, the thing she'd been thinking about, the thing she couldn't quite shape into words but talked around until she felt the shape of it. Everyone else is asleep. She knows by the breathing. She's always known by the breathing. She lies on her back and feels the mat beneath her, the thin cotton, the hard-packed earth underneath it that she stopped noticing years ago. She feels the weight of the night air, warm and alive, coming through the open window. She hears the crickets in their layered conversation. She hears the river, faintly, from here. Just the lowest register of it, the way a very distant sound becomes more felt than heard. She looks at the ceiling. In the dark, the ceiling is invisible. Where the ceiling is, there is only dark. She looks at the dark where the ceiling is, and it's not frightening. It is simply the close sky, the interior sky, the part of the night that is hers. Korsar is asleep, breathing in that almost deliberate way of his. She thinks about the river evening, what he said about the light, the exactness of his attention, the way he paid attention to things that other people didn't think were worth the trouble of noticing. She doesn't name what she's thinking about. She just holds it, the way you hold something warm when you're not sure yet what to do with it. Her eyes close. Outside, the cow stands at the edge of the yard. It is doing what cows do, not sleeping, exactly, not waking, exactly. That bovine middle state that looks like nothing, but is in fact a particular kind of rest. Standing in the dark, massive and patient, the bell around its neck, still now, its breath slow and audible and regular. The neem tree makes its small, dry paper sound. The banyan at the center of the village, if you could see it, which you cannot, it's too dark, is completely still. It has been completely still at this hour for probably 100 years. It will be completely still at this hour 100 years from now. The banyan is not concerned with electricity or the lack of it. The banyan is working on a much longer timeline. The pond is dark. The mosque is dark, its cracked wall invisible, its presence felt only in the familiar way that very old structures become part of the landscape of a place, sensed even when unseen. The village is asleep. Part 10. The last thing. Before we end, here is the last thing I want to say. Sleep is very old. Every human being who has ever lived has slept. Every one of them has gone through something like what this family went through every night. The light going away, the dark coming in, the body's long negotiation with the end of the day. They all did it without electric light. For most of human history, they did it in caves and in weed huts and in stone houses and in tents stretched over wooden frames. They did it in winter and in summer and in every climate the planet has. They did it sick and healthy and worried and peaceful and heartbroken and full of hope. They did it in villages with no names that anyone wrote down, near trees that meant something to the people who lived beside them. They did it with 5 people on mats on the floor, breathing together, moving through the night together. They did it just fine. So can you. Your body knows how to do this. It has been doing it for an extremely long time. It knows the curve of the night. It knows the rhythm of breath slowing. It knows the particular relaxation that the dark requests of the jaw and the shoulders and the space behind the eyes. You don't need to figure it out. Just let the night be what it is. The village is quiet now. 5 people are asleep. The cow is resting. The banyan stands in the dark. The river moves, as it has always moved, in the direction it has always chosen, toward whatever is waiting for rivers at the end of things. The stars are out, all of them, more than you can count, more than you could name even if you spent your whole life on it. And They are doing what stars do, which is to say, they are simply being there, indifferent and beautiful, which is enough. It is enough. You are here. It is enough. Let go. Close your eyes. You don't have to go anywhere yet. Just breathe in through the nose, slowly, until your lungs are full. Hold it for just a moment, and then let it go. Again, in, hold, and out. The world you were in a few minutes ago, the noise, the screens, the weight of the day, is already beginning to dissolve, like ink dropped into still water, spreading, fading, until there's nothing left but the faint color of it. You are safe, you are warm. There is nothing you need to decide tonight, nothing that cannot wait until morning. Let your shoulders drop, let your jaw unclench, let your hands rest open, palms up, like someone who has put everything down and chosen, finally, to rest. Tonight, you are going somewhere very old, older than memory, older than language, older than any story you were ever told in school. You are going to a place that should not exist, and yet it does. Imagine it is just before dawn. Not the dawn you know, not the grey, uncertain dawn of a city with its distant traffic and its blue-lit windows. This is older than that. This is the dawn that humans first named, the one that no one had ever seen before, and everyone was terrified of losing. You are standing on a hillside. The air is cool and completely still, the way air gets in the hour before the sun arrives, as if the world is holding its breath. The sky above you is not black. It is that particular shade of deep, deep blue that only exists for a few minutes each night, when darkness has agreed to begin its slow retreat and light has not yet dared to arrive. You can see stars, not a few of them, all of them, every single one that the sky has ever held. They are not distant tonight. They feel close enough to press your palm against, close enough to warm your hand. The ground beneath your feet is dry earth and limestone, ancient stone, worn smooth in some places, sharp in others. You step carefully, but you are not afraid. Somehow you know this place. Not from this life perhaps, but from somewhere deeper, from the part of you that is older than your own name. Ahead, silhouetted against that impossible blue sky, you can see them. The pillars. Tall, impossibly tall for something built by human hands 12,000 years ago. They rise from the earth like arms reaching upward, two of them together always, paired, standing at the center of each circle like two old friends who decided long ago that they would never leave this place. You walk toward them. The grass around you is short and silver in this pre-dawn light. Small insects chirp somewhere in the distance, a sound so ancient it almost doesn't register as sound at all. Just rhythm, just the pulse of the earth breathing. You are not in a hurry. There is no hurry here. You step through a gap in the outer wall, low stones, carefully placed, arranged in a rough oval, and you are inside the first enclosure. Stop here for a moment. Feel the difference in the air. It is cooler inside, sheltered, the way certain places feel when many people have gathered in them and left their warmth behind. There is something held here, something that has refused for 12,000 years to fully leave. The two central pillars rise before you, perhaps 5 meters tall, carved from a single piece of limestone each. They are T-shaped, broad, flat tops like shoulders, like the silhouette of a figure standing with arms at its sides. And when you look more carefully, you begin to see why. There are arms, carved in shallow relief along the sides of the stone, a pair of long, thin arms, bent at the elbows, Hands pressed just barely forward. Fingers. You can count the fingers in this light, just barely. These are not abstract shapes. These are beings, ancient beyond anything you have a word for, standing here, watching, not with menace, never with menace. With the patient, absolute stillness of something that has been watching so long, it no longer needs to pay close attention. You reach out and place your hand flat against the surface of one pillar. The stone is cool, slightly rough under your fingertips. And in this moment, you are aware of something that makes your breath slow and your thoughts go quiet. Someone else placed their hand here, not metaphorically, actually, physically. 12,000 years ago, a person stood in this same spot, touched this same stone, watched it being carved, watched it being raised into position by dozens of hands working together, watched it become this thing it is now, a monument, a record, a message left in stone for someone they could never have imagined. For you, you stand very still and let that understanding move through you like water. Around the outer walls of the enclosure, smaller pillars stand in a ring, 12 of them, perhaps more. They catch the faint pre-dawn light at their edges, and as your eyes adjust, you begin to see what covers them. Animals, everywhere, animals. A fox, alert and sharp-eared, carved so precisely you can see individual fur marks along its jaw. A vulture with its wings half spread, head turned to one side, watching something beyond the frame. A bull, thick-necked and low to the ground. A snake uncoiling from the base of one pillar all the way to its crown, each individual scale suggested by the careful, patient work of a stone tool, pressed and struck, pressed and struck 10,000 times. Aurochs, gazelle, crane, spider, scorpion. The world is here. The whole living world that surrounded these people. The animals they hunted, the animals they feared, the animals that visited them in dreams and were still trying to tell them something in the morning. This was not decoration. You understand that now. Standing inside this ring of carved stone in the last of the night. This was a library. This was how a people who had no writing chose to say, "We were here. We saw this world. We found it beautiful and terrifying, and full of things we could not explain. And we built this so that long after we were gone, something of that seeing would remain." You walk slowly around the inner ring, trailing your fingers along the carved surfaces. The fox, the vulture, the coiled snake, each one under your hand for a moment, and then gone. As you move deeper into the enclosure, deeper into the circle, closer to those two great central pillars, and whatever it is they were watching for. Your breathing has slowed considerably now. You notice this without trying to change it. In, slow, out, slower. The world is very quiet. Sit down if you like. There are flat stones here, placed along the inner edge of the enclosure. They have been here long enough that they feel almost like furniture, almost like they were meant for exactly this, for a person to come and rest and think and be still. You sit. Above you, the sky has shifted. The deepest blue is beginning to lighten almost imperceptibly at the eastern horizon. Not light yet, the suggestion of light, the memory of what light feels like beginning to return. Let me tell you something about this place, something that was discovered only a few decades ago, and that, even now, most people do not fully understand the weight of. Göbekli Tepe was built 12,000 years ago. To give that number its proper shape, the Egyptian pyramids are roughly 4,500 years old. The ancient city of Ur, one of humanity's earliest cities, is perhaps 6,000 years old. Stonehenge began around 5,000 years ago. When the pharaohs walked, Göbekli Tepe had already been buried for 7,000 years. The people who built this place were hunter-gatherers, not farmers, not city dwellers, not people organized under kings or priests or bureaucracies. They were small bands of humans, mobile, nomadic, following the movement of animals and seasons across this landscape. Who stopped here, on this particular hill, in what is now southeastern Turkey, and built something that required the cooperation of hundreds, possibly thousands of people over generations? They quarried limestone from the ridges nearby, stones weighing 10, 20, 40 tons. They shaped them with tools made of flint. They moved them, somehow, across distances that should have been impossible. And they built circles, precise, planned, deliberate circles, at least 20 of them, possibly many more, still waiting under the earth to be excavated, each one slightly different, each one oriented with care, each one filled with these carved figures, these animals, these beings with arms and fingers who stood at the center of everything and watched. The question that archaeologists are still whispering to each other, the one that keeps them awake, the one that rewrites everything we thought we knew about human history, is this: why? Why here, before farming, before surplus food, before the organizational structures we thought were necessary for something like this? Why did people come together to build something this large, this precise, this permanent? One answer, just one. But it changes everything. They came because something mattered more to them than convenience. Belief mattered, meaning mattered. The need to mark this place, this particular hillside, under this particular sky, as sacred, as significant, as the center of something larger than any single life. They were not primitive. They were, in some ways, more purely human than anything that came after. You rest your head back against the stone behind you and look up at the sky. It is lighter now. Still night, still the deep residue of night, but lighter. The stars nearest the horizon have begun to disappear one by one as the faint atmospheric glow of approaching sunrise begins to overwhelm them. Beneath you, beneath the hill itself, the ground holds secrets. The archaeologists who first came here in the 1990s understood almost immediately that they were standing on something extraordinary. Not just these rings of pillars, not just these magnificent carvings, the entire hill, a hill nearly 300 meters in diameter and 15 meters high, was itself an artifact. It had been made deliberately by human hands. Centuries of occupation, centuries of construction and rebuilding had raised this hill from the flat plain. And at some point, roughly 10,000 years ago, the people who used this place made a choice so strange, so deliberate, so full of intention, that archaeologists are still trying to understand it. They buried it, all of it, every circle, every carved pillar, every enclosure. They brought soil and rubble and filled each structure in, carefully, completely. They buried their own monument. They sealed it under the earth as if putting something precious to sleep. And then they left. We do not know why. We may never know why. But here is what we do know. The burial preserved everything. The careful filling of soil around each pillar protected the carvings from erosion, from weather, from the slow destruction of the surface world. When the excavations began, they found the carvings as sharp and precise as the day they were made. Animals still alert, snakes still coiled, the beings at the center still standing, still watching, their carved arms still pressed slightly forward as if offering something. 10,000 years of perfect sleep, and then humans found them again. You breathe slowly in the dark, in and out. Somewhere, impossibly far beneath where you are sitting, there are more circles. There are structures not yet touched by excavation. There are carvings no living human being has seen in 10,000 years. They are there right now, in the dark and the silence, waiting with the patience of stone. Let yourself imagine them. Not as textbook figures, not as the cartoon versions of prehistoric people, hunched, simple, afraid of everything. Not that. Imagine a person standing roughly where you are standing now, 5 feet, perhaps a little more, dark-eyed, dark-haired, dressed in animal skins that have been carefully prepared, carefully sewn. Their hands are calloused from work, from flint knapping, from scraping hides, from hauling stone, but their hands are also expressive, capable, exactly like yours. They have spent their entire life outdoors. They know the night sky the way you know a familiar room. Every feature, every relationship, every pattern that shifts with the seasons. They know which plants heal and which ones kill. They know the behavior of every animal in this landscape well enough to predict, to intercept, to survive. They dream. We know this because the carvings suggest it. Animals arranged not as a simple record of what existed, but as something stranger, more layered. A vulture carrying a human head, a figure half human, half animal, images from somewhere between waking and sleep. They grieve. We know this because careful burial was already ancient by this point, because the dead mattered, because someone, somewhere, 10,000 years before the word monument existed in any language, decided that the people who built this place deserved to be remembered. They laugh. We have no evidence of this, and we have every evidence of this, because laughter is older than language, older than fire, older perhaps than anything that makes us human, except the capacity to feel. This person standing where you are standing, looking at the same pillars you are looking at now in the dark, this person worried about things, about the coming winter, about a child who was sick, about a disagreement with someone they cared about the fact that they felt, sometimes, a longing they could not name, a sense that this world, as beautiful and terrifying as it was not quite everything, that there was something beyond the horizon of their understanding that they were spending their whole life moving toward. They built this in answer to that longing. They raised these stones and carved these creatures and stood inside these circles under this sky because something in them could not accept a world without meaning, could not move through this landscape without leaving a mark that said, "We were here. We saw this. We tried to understand." You close your eyes for a moment. You understand them. More than you understand almost anyone else. The carvings on the pillars are not random. This has become clear as excavations have progressed and researchers have begun to map the imagery with more precision. The animals are placed with intention. Specific creatures appear in specific positions on specific pillars, in specific enclosures. The vultures appear near the top. The snakes tend to coil along the edges, the margins, the boundaries. The foxes are often shown in motion, darting, alert, just slightly out of reach. In some enclosures, one particular animal dominates, a whole circle given over to the imagery of a single creature, as if this space was consecrated to something. A temple not to a god, exactly, but to a relationship, to the complex, dangerous, necessary relationship between these people and the wild things they lived among. You think of that as you sit in the growing stillness. The relationship between hunter and hunted is nothing like we imagine it from the outside. It is not simple brutality. Across every culture where hunting is still practiced in the traditional way, from the Arctic to the Amazon to the savannas of Eastern Africa, there is the same understanding. The animal gives itself. The animal must be respected. The kill is a transaction, a covenant, something that creates an obligation in the person who receives it. The people who built Göbekli Tepe lived inside that understanding completely. The animals on these walls were not trophies, they were relatives, they were powers. They were the beings with whom these people shared the world, and through whom, somehow, they understood their own place in it. This is why the animals are so precise. Look at the fox carved on that smaller pillar to your left. You can see it in the pale pre-dawn light now, just barely. The proportions are exact, the angle of the ears, the sharpness of the muzzle. This was not carved by someone who had seen a fox once and tried to remember it. This was carved by someone who had watched foxes for their entire life, who had sat in the early morning cold, studying the way a fox moves its head when it hears something, who had found fox tracks in the snow and followed them for hours just to understand where they led. The knowledge embedded in these stones is immense. It is not the knowledge of textbooks or laboratories. It is something older and, in some ways, deeper. The accumulated understanding of a people who had nothing between them and the world. No glass windows, no electric light, no processed food, and who therefore knew that world with an intimacy and precision we have mostly lost. You breathe in, slowly, out. The fox watches you from the stone. You think it is a fair exchange. The hill is darker before it gets lighter. That happens just before dawn, a final settling of shadows before the light commits. In this darkest moment, lean back a little more against the cool stone. Let your body relax completely. There is nowhere you need to be, nothing you need to hold. The question that haunts Göbekli Tepe, the one that will probably never be fully answered, is the question of what happened to the civilization that built it. Not the individuals, not the specific people who shaped these stones. People die and their children carry on. That is how it has always worked. But the knowledge, the practice, the organized collective multi-generational project of building these circles, what became of that? We know that farming began in this same region of the world at roughly this same time. The Fertile Crescent, the land between the great rivers, was where wheat was first domesticated, where sheep and goats were first kept rather than hunted. And Göbekli Tepe sits at the heart of that region. One theory, and it is a theory not a certainty, but it is a compelling one, is that the relationship goes deeper than proximity. That the need to feed the massive gatherings of people required to build something like this drove the earliest experiments with agriculture. That Göbekli Tepe did not come after the development of settled life. It preceded it. It created the conditions that made it necessary. The monument came first, the city followed. If that is true, if the human impulse toward meaning, toward the sacred, toward the gathering of people around something larger than survival, if that impulse preceded and drove the development of civilization rather than the other way around, then everything we think we know about who we are is slightly different. We did not become spiritual because we had enough food and free time. We built systems to feed ourselves because we were already spiritual. The hunger for meaning is older than the hunger for bread. Let that sit in the quiet for a moment. In through the nose, out slowly. The sky is beginning, very subtly, to change at its edge. You are not the first to sit in this enclosure and think these thoughts. 12,000 years of human beings have moved through this landscape. Many of them climbed this hill. Many of them stood among these stones. Even after they were buried, this was a place people came to, a place with a reputation, a hill that people pointed to and said, "Something is here, something that matters." The first archaeologist to take it seriously was a German researcher named Klaus Schmidt, who came here in 1994 and immediately understood what he was looking at. He spent the rest of his life on this hill. He died in 2014, having excavated perhaps 5% of what is here. He said once that this place would require centuries of careful work to understand, that every answer the excavations produced would open 10 new questions, that this was not unusual in archaeology, but that Göbekli Tepe had a quality he had not encountered before, a quality of depth, of layers beneath layers beneath layers, each one containing something that required the previous ones to be fully understood. He said it was like reading a book written in a language you almost know. You understand that feeling right now. Because sitting here in this enclosure, watching this ancient sky begin its slow transformation above these ancient stones, you feel something that is not quite knowledge and not quite memory. It is something older than both, something that lives not in the mind but in the body, in the particular rhythm of your breathing in a quiet place, in the way darkness and stone and the faint smell of the earth combine into something that feels like recognition. You have been here before, not in this body, not in any body you can name, but something in you carries the cellular memory of sitting in firelight and silence and looking up at the same patterns of stars overhead, feeling the same impossible longing to understand what they mean. The longing has not changed. It has never changed. It will not change. It is perhaps the most human thing there is. Somewhere below the hill, in the valley beyond, a bird begins to sing. Just one bird, a single, clear, high note repeated 3 times and then silence. Then again, 3 notes and silence, as if it is testing whether the world is ready yet. You listen. The sound is extraordinarily clear in this still air. After a while, another bird answers from a different direction, a different call, rounder, lower, more complex, a conversation beginning, a negotiation about whether the night is really over. Slowly, the bird calls multiply, not quickly, not all at once. The way light arrives, the way everything true arrives, gradually, then completely. And as the birds begin to fill the air with their patient argument about dawn, you find that your body has grown heavier, a good heaviness, the heaviness of a day that has been lived fully and is now, finally, releasing its hold. Your hands are heavier, your shoulders, your eyelids, if they were open. The stone against your back is cool and solid, and entirely reliable. It has been here for 12,000 years, and it will be here when the morning comes. It does not need anything from you. It is simply here, present, steady, old beyond imagining. Rest against it. There is nothing you need to solve tonight. The carvings on the pillars are still visible in the soft pre-dawn light. The fox, the vulture, the snake coiling. The two great central pillars standing like silent sentinels, their carved hands pressed slightly forward, fingers curved, offering something you cannot quite name. Peace, perhaps, or understanding, or simply the knowledge that you are not the first to sit here, bewildered and awed, wondering what it all means, and finding that the wondering itself is enough, that the question is not a problem to be solved, but a gift to be carried through your whole life. You are part of this, all of it. The stars that are fading now were the same stars these people watched. The ground beneath you is the same ground their feet pressed against. The longing you feel for meaning, for connection, for something larger than your single brief life is the same longing that moved 100,000 hands to lift these stones. You have not lost this. You carried it here with you. There is one more thing I want to tell you before the night is completely gone. When they buried Göbekli Tepe, when those ancient people filled in their circles with soil and stones and sealed them under the earth, they left something behind in each enclosure. Small things, intentionally placed, animal bones, stone tools. Fragments of what might have been offerings, objects arranged with care among the fill, as if the act of burial was not an ending, but a continuation of whatever ritual had been practiced here, as if they were not abandoning this place but entrusting it, sealing something inside for safekeeping. For whom, we cannot know for certain. Perhaps for the earth itself, perhaps for whatever they believed lived in the darkness beneath the ground, perhaps for people they imagined might come far in the future, almost incomprehensibly far, beyond any horizon of time they could have conceptualized. Perhaps for you. Perhaps the act of burial, the careful, loving act of preservation, was itself a form of communication. A message sent not in words, they had no writing, but in stone and soil and intention. We were here. We built something. We cared about it enough to protect it. We believed, somehow, that it would be found again. That is an act of extraordinary faith. To do something, to build something, to create something, to care for something, in the absolute knowledge that you will not live to see it received. To leave a letter for a reader you cannot imagine, in a language that does not yet exist, knowing only that the letter matters and that one day, somehow, someone will understand. You understood. You are here, 12,000 years later, and you are sitting in this circle in the last of the night, and you understood. That is not nothing. That is, in fact, everything. Before the first true light, when the sky is that particular grey that is not yet morning, but has agreed to become it, let yourself imagine one more thing. Among the people who came here, there were those whose role it was to tend this place. Not builders. The builders had come and gone across generations of construction. Tenders, keepers, people who understood what these circles were for, who knew the specific pillar where a certain ceremony was conducted, who remembered which carving corresponded to which story, which season, which understanding, who carried in their minds the entire accumulated knowledge that made this place meaningful rather than merely old. They would have come here in the early morning, perhaps, In exactly this light, they would have walked the enclosures slowly, checking the stones for damage, clearing away debris, perhaps burning something fragrant at the base of the central pillars, dried herbs, pine resin, something whose smoke rose and carried intention upward into the air. They would have sat where you are sitting. They would have breathed this air. They would have known the way you know now that this stillness is not empty. That silence can be full of something, but the dark just before dawn contains more than darkness. They were the memory keepers, and in a way, tonight, so are you. Because you came here, you sat with these stones in the quiet. You let their age and their mystery and their beauty move through you without grasping for explanation. You were present to something real, something that 12,000 years could not erase. That is not a small thing. It is, in fact, an act of continuity. You have added yourself to the long, unbroken chain of human beings who sat in a circle of stones under a fading sky and felt, really felt, what it means to be alive in a world this strange and this ancient and this generous. The first light is here now, not the sun, not yet, but the sky in the east has committed, a pale gold warmth spreading slowly upward, gently erasing the last stars, one by one. The carved animals on the pillars catch the light differently now. The fox looks alert, as always. The snake coils. The vulture spreads its wings in exactly the same half spread as it has for 12,000 years. The two central pillars stand. They will stand when you are gone from this place. They will stand tomorrow and the day after. They will stand, patient as only stone can be, through every season, every century, every civilization that rises and falls around them. You don't need to hold on to this. The place will hold itself. You can let it go now. Let the hillside soften beneath you. Let the stones grow gentle and warm. Let the carved creatures rest their eyes. Let the bird calls recede into the distance like a radio, slowly being turned down. Let the golden light fade back to the soft, familiar darkness behind your closed eyes. Feel the weight of your body exactly where it is, in your bed, under your blankets, warm and held and entirely safe. The ground beneath you is solid. The air around you is exactly the right temperature. There is nothing you need to do. Breathe in, slowly, all the way down and out. All the ancient air leaving your lungs, all the questions, all the wondering, all the weight of the day that was. Let it go with that breath. In again and out. You are here, in this body, in this room, in this particular moment in the long, long story of human beings who have always, always found a way to rest, who have built their fires and sat in their circles and looked up at their stars, and eventually let the night do its work. Let the night do its work. You don't have to understand anything right now. You don't have to hold anything. The stones will keep what needs to be kept. The birds will announce what needs announcing. And you can sink now, slowly, gently, completely, down into the warmth, down into the dark, down into the place below thought, below memory, below even the oldest longings, down into sleep. Somewhere in southeastern Turkey, a hill rises from a flat plain. Beneath it, circles of carved stone stand in the dark and the silence, exactly as they have for 12,000 years. The animals are still there, fox and snake and vulture and crane, the two great pillars with their patient arms, the coiled serpent, the watchful birds, they are not waiting for anything. They have always been exactly here, and now so are you, exactly here, breathing, warm, held by the night the way stone is held by the earth. Rest now. You have traveled far enough. Let the dark be dark. Let the quiet be quiet. Let sleep come the way dawn comes, slowly, then completely, then all at once.